Have you ever looked in the toilet after a bowel movement and wondered if what you saw was normal? It might seem like an uncomfortable topic to talk about. But in medicine, your stool is actually one of the most powerful windows into your internal health. In fact, many gastrointestinal doctors will tell you something surprising. Your stool can reveal early warning signs about your metabolism, digestive system, and even certain cancers. And this is especially important for adults over the age of 60. As we age, changes occur throughout the digestive tract. The lining of the intestines becomes more sensitive. The microbiome shifts. Enzyme production can decrease, and the risk of conditions affecting the colon, pancreas, liver, and stomach begins to rise. But here's the encouraging part. Your body often sends signals long before serious disease develops. And one of the earliest signals can appear in something many people overlook every day: the shape, color, and consistency of your stool. Now, let me be clear. Not every unusual bowel movement means something serious is happening, but certain patterns, when they appear consistently, can signal that something deeper may need attention. Sometimes the issue may be simple, like dehydration, fiber imbalance, or gut microbiome changes. But in other cases, unusual stool patterns may reflect problems like inflammation in the digestive tract, bile flow disruption, intestinal bleeding, or abnormal growths in the colon. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your digestive system is like a processing line in a factory. Food enters the stomach, where it is broken down by acids and enzymes. It then moves into the small intestine, where nutrients are absorbed. Finally, what remains enters the large intestine, where water is absorbed and stool is formed. If something disrupts any part of that process, digestion, absorption, or elimination, the stool can change in appearance. Doctors often use something called the Bristol stool chart, which categorizes stool types from very hard and constipated to loose and watery. But beyond consistency, physicians also pay attention to color, shape, and frequency. For example, black stool, pencil-thin stool, pale or clay-colored stool, persistent diarrhea, visible blood. Each of these patterns can provide clues about what's happening inside the digestive system, and understanding these clues can sometimes lead to earlier detection of serious conditions, including colorectal cancer. In today's video, we're going to walk through 6 important stool warning signs that seniors should never ignore. We'll also talk about the underlying physiology behind these signs, why they occur, and what practical steps you can take to support a healthier digestive system. Because when it comes to long-term health, early awareness can make an enormous difference. And by the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer understanding of what your body may be trying to tell you. If this kind of science-based health education is helpful for you, consider subscribing. I share content like this regularly to help people support their metabolism, digestive health, and longevity naturally. Now let's begin with the key insights we're going to explore today. Let's begin with the first warning pattern doctors often pay attention to: black or tar-like stool. At first glance, many people assume darker stool simply comes from something they ate. And sometimes that's absolutely true. Foods like blueberries, black licorice, or iron supplements can temporarily darken stool. But when stool becomes consistently black, sticky, and tar-like, physicians consider something else. This condition is called melena, and it often signals bleeding somewhere in the upper digestive tract. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine spilling red paint into a long river. By the time that paint travels many miles downstream, it no longer looks bright red. It becomes diluted, darker, and altered. Something very similar happens inside your digestive system. When bleeding occurs in the stomach or small intestine, the blood travels through digestive fluids, stomach acid, and enzymes before leaving the body. During that journey, hemoglobin in the blood breaks down and reacts with digestive chemicals. This chemical reaction turns the stool black and sticky. That's why doctors pay close attention to this specific color and texture. Now, there are several possible causes for this type of bleeding. One common cause is stomach ulcers, which can develop when the protective lining of the stomach becomes weakened. Another cause can be chronic inflammation of the stomach lining, a condition known as gastritis. Certain medications can also contribute to this process. For example, long-term use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, medications commonly used for joint pain, may irritate the stomach lining over time. But occasionally, black stool can also be associated with growths or tumors in the stomach or upper digestive tract. And this is why persistent black stool should always be evaluated by a medical professional. What the research shows is that early investigation of gastrointestinal bleeding significantly improves outcomes, especially when conditions are caught early. But here's another important layer that often gets overlooked. Bleeding in the digestive tract is not only about structural problems like ulcers or tumors, it can also be influenced by the health of the digestive lining itself. Think of the intestinal lining as a protective barrier. This barrier separates the contents of the digestive tract from the bloodstream and immune system. When this barrier becomes irritated due to chronic inflammation, poor diet, excessive alcohol, or certain medications, it becomes more vulnerable to injury, and that vulnerability can sometimes lead to small areas of bleeding. This is where lifestyle factors begin to matter. Supporting the integrity of the digestive lining can play an important role in overall gut health. For example, diets rich in fiber, vegetables, and polyphenols help support the gut microbiome. Fermented foods may encourage beneficial bacteria. Avoiding excessive alcohol helps protect the stomach lining. Managing stress supports healthy digestive signaling. Your gut and brain communicate constantly through something called the gut-brain axis, and chronic stress can increase digestive inflammation over time. Another powerful strategy is simply paying attention to hydration. Water helps maintain healthy digestive movement and supports the protective mucus lining of the stomach and intestines. Now, one more important point. If you ever notice persistent black, tar-like stool, especially when it's accompanied by fatigue, dizziness, or weakness, it's important to seek medical care promptly. These symptoms may indicate ongoing blood loss that needs evaluation. The key takeaway here is simple. Your stool color can reveal important clues about your digestive system. And when your body changes that signal dramatically, it's often asking for attention. If this breakdown of digestive health is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I share science-based strategies like this regularly to help people understand their bodies, protect their metabolism, and support long-term health naturally. Now let's move to the second warning sign doctors pay close attention to: bright red blood in the stool. Unlike black stool, which usually signals bleeding higher up in the digestive tract, bright red blood often indicates bleeding much closer to the end of the colon or rectum. And this distinction is important because where the blood appears in the digestive tract often determines how it looks when it leaves the body. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Think of the digestive tract as a long tunnel. If bleeding happens near the entrance of that tunnel, the stomach or small intestine, the blood travels a long distance before exiting, which allows digestive enzymes and acids to break it down. But if bleeding occurs near the end of the tunnel, the blood has very little time to change. So instead of turning dark, it appears bright red and fresh. Now, the good news is that the most common causes of bright red blood in stool are not cancer. Two of the most frequent causes include hemorrhoids, anal fissures. Hemorrhoids are swollen veins in the lower rectum or anus. They can develop from prolonged sitting, constipation, or straining during bowel movements. Anal fissures, on the other hand, are tiny tears in the lining of the anus, often caused by passing very hard stool. Both conditions can produce small amounts of bright red blood, often visible on toilet paper or in the toilet bowl. But here's where careful observation becomes important. When bleeding happens repeatedly, or when it appears mixed directly into the stool, doctors become more concerned about what might be happening higher inside the colon. This is because bleeding can sometimes originate from polyps or abnormal growths in the colon. Polyps are small growths that form along the lining of the large intestine. Many polyps are harmless, but some types can slowly develop into colorectal cancer over time if they are not removed. According to research from organizations like American Cancer Society, colorectal cancer often develops very slowly over many years, which means early warning signs may appear long before serious symptoms develop. This is why doctors emphasize something very important. Never ignore persistent bleeding. Even if it turns out to be something minor, it's always better to check early. Now let's talk about another factor that influences bleeding risk: the health of the colon lining itself. Your large intestine is lined with a delicate layer of cells that constantly renew themselves. This lining depends heavily on the health of the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in the digestive tract. Beneficial bacteria produce substances called short-chain fatty acids, especially one called butyrate. Butyrate helps nourish the cells of the colon and maintain a healthy intestinal barrier. When the microbiome becomes imbalanced, often due to low fiber diets, excessive processed foods, or chronic stress, the protective environment of the colon can weaken. And when that happens, inflammation may increase. Over time, chronic inflammation can contribute to conditions like diverticulosis, inflammatory bowel disease, and abnormal cell growth. So supporting the microbiome becomes an important strategy for protecting colon health. Simple lifestyle strategies include increasing dietary fiber from vegetables, beans, and whole foods, consuming fermented foods like yogurt or kefir, staying physically active, maintaining stable blood sugar levels. Fiber, in particular, plays a crucial role because it feeds beneficial bacteria and helps produce the compounds that keep the colon lining strong. So the takeaway here is this: occasional minor bleeding can have harmless explanations. But persistent or unexplained bleeding should never be ignored, especially after the age of 60. Your digestive system communicates through signals, and learning to recognize those signals can help protect your long-term health. Now let's talk about another stool pattern that doctors often pay close attention to: pencil-thin or unusually narrow stool. At first glance, this might not seem like a serious issue. Many people assume stool shape simply changes based on diet or hydration, and sometimes that's true. But when stool becomes consistently narrow over time, physicians begin to ask an important question. Is something restricting the pathway inside the colon? Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a wide highway where traffic normally flows easily across several lanes. Now imagine construction barriers slowly narrowing that highway down to a single lane. Cars can still pass through, but the flow becomes restricted and compressed. Something similar can occur inside the large intestine. Under normal conditions, stool moves through a wide, flexible colon, allowing it to form its typical soft, cylindrical shape. But if something begins to narrow the internal space, the stool may start to appear thinner or ribbon-like. Doctors call this a change in stool caliber. Now, several different conditions can create this type of narrowing. One possibility is chronic constipation. When stool remains in the colon for too long, it can become compacted and irregular in shape. Another cause may be intestinal spasms, which can occur in conditions like irritable bowel syndrome. But there are situations where physicians look more closely. One example is the presence of colon polyps. Polyps are small growths that develop on the lining of the colon. Many of them are completely benign. However, certain types, known as adenomatous polyps, have the potential to gradually develop into colorectal cancer over time. This process is usually very slow. In fact, studies referenced by organizations like National Cancer Institute show that it can take 10 to 15 years for a polyp to evolve into cancer. That slow progression is actually very good news, because it means there is a large window of opportunity for early detection and removal. But here's the key point many people miss. The body sometimes sends subtle signals during this process. Changes in stool shape, especially when persistent, can be one of those signals. Now, I want to emphasize something important again. A single episode of narrow stool does not mean something serious is happening. Digestion varies from day to day depending on hydration, stress, and diet. Doctors become concerned when the change is consistent and long-lasting, especially when it appears alongside other symptoms such as unexplained weight loss, fatigue, abdominal discomfort, persistent constipation, or diarrhea. These patterns may indicate that the digestive system needs closer evaluation. But beyond structural causes, stool shape can also reflect the functional health of the digestive system. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Healthy stool formation depends heavily on fiber intake, hydration, and gut motility. Fiber acts like a sponge inside the intestines. It absorbs water and gives stool its bulk and structure. Without enough fiber, stool becomes smaller, harder, and more difficult to pass. This can create irregular shapes and increased pressure in the colon. The microbiome also plays a major role here. Beneficial gut bacteria ferment fiber and produce compounds that help regulate intestinal movement and maintain the health of the colon lining. So supporting digestive health becomes one of the most powerful preventive strategies. Simple habits can make a significant difference. Aim for 25-30 grams of fiber daily from whole foods. Drink adequate water throughout the day. Stay physically active to stimulate intestinal movement. Include fermented foods that support microbiome diversity. Your digestive system thrives on consistency and rhythm. When those systems are supported, stool formation becomes more regular and predictable. And if this kind of science-based explanation is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I share practical strategies like this regularly to help people support their gut health, metabolism, and long-term longevity naturally. Next, we'll examine another stool pattern doctors pay attention to: pale or clay-colored stool, and what it may reveal about liver, gallbladder, and bile flow health. Now let's explore another stool pattern that often surprises people when they first hear about it: pale, gray, or clay-colored stool. Most people assume stool is always supposed to be brown, and in healthy digestion, that's generally true. But the real question is, why is stool brown in the first place? The answer involves an important digestive fluid called bile. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Bile is produced by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and released into the small intestine when you eat. Its main job is to help break down fats so your body can absorb essential nutrients like fat-soluble vitamins. But bile does something else as well. It contains pigments that give stool its characteristic brown color. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of bile like a natural dye added during the digestive process. As food moves through the intestines, bile pigments mix with it and gradually transform it into the familiar brown stool we expect. When bile flow is disrupted, that coloring process changes. Without enough bile entering the digestive tract, stool may appear light tan, gray, or clay-like in color. Doctors call this condition a colic stool, which simply means stool lacking normal bile pigments. Now, several different conditions can interfere with bile flow. One common cause is gallstones, which can temporarily block the ducts that carry bile from the liver and gallbladder into the intestine. Another possibility involves liver inflammation, where the liver becomes less efficient at producing or secreting bile. And occasionally, a blockage in the bile ducts or pancreas can interfere with this process. When bile cannot move normally through the digestive system, it doesn't just affect stool color. It can also influence fat digestion. People sometimes notice additional symptoms such as greasy or floating stool, difficulty digesting fatty foods, bloating after meals, unexplained fatigue. Why fatigue? Because bile plays a key role in absorbing fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamins A, D, E, and K. These nutrients are essential for immune health, bone strength, brain function, and metabolic balance. If fat digestion becomes impaired, nutrient absorption may decline. Over time, that can affect overall energy and metabolic health. This is why doctors view persistent pale stool as a signal worth evaluating. But there's another important layer here that many people overlook: liver health. Your liver is one of the most metabolically active organs in your body. It performs more than 500 essential functions, including detoxification, hormone regulation, and bile production. As we age, metabolic stress, especially from excess sugar, processed foods, and chronic inflammation can gradually affect liver function. One increasingly common condition is fatty liver disease, where excess fat accumulates inside liver cells. According to research referenced by organizations like the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, fatty liver now affects millions of adults worldwide, often without obvious symptoms in its early stages. When liver function becomes impaired, bile production and flow may be affected as well. So supporting liver health becomes a key strategy for maintaining healthy digestion. Practical steps include reducing excess sugar and refined carbohydrates, supporting blood sugar balance, consuming fiber-rich vegetables, including healthy fats such as olive oil and omega-3s, maintaining regular physical activity. These habits help reduce metabolic stress on the liver and support the natural production and flow of bile. So the takeaway here is simple. If stool occasionally appears lighter in color after certain meals, it may not be significant. But persistent pale or clay-colored stool, especially when accompanied by digestive discomfort or fatigue, deserves medical attention. Your body is communicating something important about the digestive process. Now let's look at another digestive signal doctors watch very closely: persistent diarrhea or sudden changes in bowel habits. Everyone experiences occasional digestive upset. A new food, travel, stress, or a temporary infection can easily change bowel movements for a few days. That's completely normal. But when diarrhea continues for several weeks, or when bowel habits suddenly change after many years of consistency, physicians begin to look deeper because your digestive system is normally very rhythmic. Most people develop a fairly predictable pattern: a certain time of day, a certain consistency, a certain frequency. So when that rhythm changes dramatically, it often means something inside the digestive system is being disrupted. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your intestines are lined with millions of specialized cells that regulate absorption and fluid balance. Under healthy conditions, these cells absorb nutrients and most of the water from digested food before it leaves the body. But when inflammation develops inside the digestive tract, that balance changes. Instead of absorbing fluid, the intestines begin releasing excess fluid, which leads to loose or watery stool. This process is often triggered by irritation or inflammation of the intestinal lining. Now, there are many possible causes for this type of inflammation. Common causes include food intolerances, infections, medication side effects, gut microbiome imbalance. But in some cases, persistent diarrhea can also signal more serious conditions affecting the colon. For example, conditions such as inflammatory bowel disease involve chronic inflammation that disrupts normal intestinal function. And in some situations, abnormal growths in the colon may irritate the intestinal lining, leading to ongoing changes in bowel habits. That's why doctors emphasize an important rule. Any bowel change lasting longer than 2 to 3 weeks should be evaluated. Now let's talk about something else that strongly influences bowel habits, but often gets overlooked: the gut microbiome. Your digestive tract contains trillions of bacteria, and these microorganisms play a major role in digestion, immune function, and inflammation control. When the microbiome is balanced, these bacteria help regulate stool formation and intestinal movement. But when the microbiome becomes disrupted, a condition known as dysbiosis, the digestive system can become unpredictable. This imbalance can lead to symptoms like diarrhea, bloating, gas, irregular bowel movements. Modern diets that are low in fiber and high in ultra-processed foods can significantly reduce microbiome diversity. And when beneficial bacteria decline, inflammation inside the digestive tract can increase. What the research shows is that people who consume fiber-rich plant foods tend to have far more diverse gut bacteria. According to research supported by organizations like Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, higher fiber intake is strongly associated with healthier gut microbial ecosystems. Fiber acts as a fuel source for beneficial bacteria, allowing them to produce compounds that help protect the intestinal lining and regulate immune responses. So when it comes to protecting digestive health, simple daily habits can make a powerful difference. Increase vegetables, beans, and whole plant foods. Include fermented foods such as yogurt, or kefir. Stay physically active to stimulate intestinal movement. Maintain healthy sleep patterns, which influence gut bacteria through the gut-brain axis. The digestive system is deeply connected to your metabolism, immune system, and nervous system. When one system becomes imbalanced, the others often follow. So paying attention to persistent changes in bowel habits is one of the most practical ways to monitor digestive health over time. And if this information is helping you better understand how your body communicates, consider subscribing. I share science-based strategies like this regularly to help people support metabolic health, digestive resilience, and long-term longevity naturally. Now let's discuss the final signal. Doctors often consider one of the most important combinations: unexplained weight loss, along with noticeable changes in stool patterns. Weight naturally fluctuates throughout life. Changes in appetite, activity levels, or diet can easily shift body weight a few pounds in either direction. But when someone begins losing weight without trying, especially several kilograms over a short period of time, doctors begin to ask deeper questions. And when this weight loss appears together with digestive symptoms, it becomes an important clue about what might be happening inside the body. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your digestive system has one central job: extract nutrients and energy from food. Every meal you eat goes through a carefully coordinated process. First, enzymes break down food into smaller molecules. Then the small intestine absorbs proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals into the bloodstream. Finally, the remaining waste moves into the large intestine, where water is absorbed and stool is formed. If any part of this process becomes disrupted, the body may struggle to absorb nutrients properly. And when nutrients are not absorbed efficiently, the body may begin to lose weight unintentionally. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your digestive system like a fuel refinery. Food enters the system as raw material. Through a series of chemical processes, that raw material is converted into usable energy for your cells. But if machinery inside the refinery becomes damaged or blocked, fuel production drops, even if the same amount of raw material continues to enter. Similarly, when digestion or absorption becomes impaired, the body may not receive the calories and nutrients it needs. This can lead to gradual weight loss, fatigue, weakness, loss of appetite. Now, several medical conditions can cause this type of problem. Chronic inflammation in the digestive tract can interfere with nutrient absorption. Certain pancreatic conditions can reduce the enzymes needed to digest food properly. And sometimes growths inside the digestive system may interfere with normal digestive processes. This is why physicians always look at patterns rather than single symptoms. For example, unexplained weight loss combined with persistent diarrhea, changes in stool shape, visible blood in stool, ongoing abdominal discomfort. These combinations provide important signals that deserve medical attention. But there's another factor we should discuss as well: metabolic health. As we age, metabolic stress can gradually influence digestion, hormone balance, and appetite regulation.